Namaste. Today is a very auspicious day for us in India. Diwali, celebration of lights, truth, the victory of truth over evil. So, I'd like to speak on a very complex statement which is confusing to understand. And in the subject of spiritualism, only very serious seekers probe into the meaning and understanding of this dictum which I am about to tell you. It was first coined by a famous philosopher, spiritualist called J.Krishnamurti, and then further elaborated by Osho. But it originated from during the Vedic period, during the ancient history, thousands of years back, by a great sage called Ashtavakra. Ashtavakra was the first person to coin the word Sakshi, meaning witness. Witness. You are the witnesser, the observer, the watcher. And after that, after philosophy, in the subject of spiritualism, around say 50 to 80 years back, quantum mechanics emerged. A new mode of physics, a new mode of science, neuroscience emerged. Going away from matter into the realm of the spiritualism, consciousness. Whereby physicists, Nobel laureates, mentors of science, starting from Niels Bohr, who gave the theorem of the observer effect, meaning the observation which was of prime importance to ancient history in the Vedas, thousands of years back, everybody guesses 5,000, 4,000, 6,000, up to 10,000, anyway, whatever number of thousands of years back, the science agreed in the observer effect that the observation influences the observed. Then came John Wheeler, who went further, stating that without observation, the universe does not exist. We do not exist. Nothing exists. No matter exists. I think he's right. If there is no observation in this universe through the five senses or through the living creatures, what would exist? Nothing. Existence is in its being. It's a thing which has to be observed. So, observation is of prime importance, which was claimed by the ancient sages. And then came Erwin Schrödinger. Erwin Schrödinger, who stated that the characteristics of waves is in the particles, meaning even the particles which form atoms, molecules and matter and physicality are also waves of energy. They have wave-like characteristics. So can you imagine how close they became to what the sages had said, which quantum mechanics now agrees to, that all that exists is just waves of energy in continuity and unity, in nothingness, which the Vedas said Shunyata. And for energy they said Brahman. Brahman means to expand. To expand. And same is the case with energy. Energy is not a thing. It is nothing. It is just the ability, the capacity to do work, and which keeps expanding. So the universe is nothing but energy, which keeps expanding. So how closely these two are related. And out of this nothingness, out of this shunyata, everything appears and disappears. Everything appears and disappears. So, the universe exhibits and expresses itself from this nothingness. Now, in order to understand this complex situation of nothingness and us in matter and consciousness, like science says, 96% of the universe is dark energy and nothingness. 4% is matter and consciousness, whether it's the sun, planets, anything. Anything which is physical is temporary. So, the universe is in absolute, in totality, in its wholesomeness. For that, in order to clarify, in order to simplify, I have a whiteboard on which I wrote down all the points which I'd like to show you. On one side what we have is the characteristics of the universe, and on the other side are the characteristics of matter and consciousness. Meaning the universe is absolute, in totality, in wholesomeness. We, in the form of matter and consciousness, are relative. Then the absolute is non-dual. Non-dual meaning not two, which is Advait Vedanta. Advait means not two, and Vedanta means the end of Vedas, the end of the spiritual subject of the Hindus. And dual means duality, two, which we are. A mind cannot function without duality. It has to relate. It is in relativity. It has to relate to opposites, positive to negative, divine to devil, good to bad, truth to lie, happiness to sadness. So, we experience life in duality, whereas the absolute, which is nothing, where there is no self, there is no I am this and I am that. There is nothing of that sort. It is absolute. It is nothing. It is waves of energy. And the third, it is eternal. It is eternal. It does not have the cycle of birth and death, whereas we are ephemeral. All matter and consciousness are ephemeral, meaning transient, meaning transitory, meaning temporary. We are all temporary. We come and go, whether it's the sun, moon, me and you. Then the universe is infinite. Infinite. And the matter and consciousness is finite. Finite meaning restricted to space and time. And this is infinite. It is limitless. Then the universe is spaceless. Spaceless. Because it is not being restricted or measured into space. Like in the other case, space, and it is divisible. We divide the space and then we measure. Then we measure height, width, length, etc., etc. So it is spaceless, it is indivisible, and this is space, this is divisible. From this, the law of conservation of energy came out, which is nothing in the Vedas as Shanti Mantra, nothing meaning the same, identical as the Vedas. The law of conservation of energy. Energy is constant. Energy is infinite. Energy is indivisible. Energy cannot be created and destroyed. Cannot be created and destroyed. But within which subset energies emerge temporarily, and they are interchangeable, and they go back into the mother energy. So the universe is timeless. It has no definition of time, whereas we have time, which we have divided into past, present and future, meaning the universe is in the eternal now, where just the duration exists from one moment to the next. Then we have shunya, nothing. The universe represents nothing. It is not aware of itself. It is in shunyata. It is attributeless. It has no attributes. And we, or the world, this is the worldly side, or we as the world, in our worldly life, we have everything. Everything. Whatever we look around, whatever we observe, and which we name, which we conceptualize, it is in everything. Then we have the ultimate reality. All the above are the ultimate reality. Ultimate reality meaning absolute reality in totality, which is not divisible. Whereas and it is the subject of all subjects, and it is that truth. It is that God. Both are absolute and in wholesomeness. Both are unchanging, and there is no second to it. It's one without a second. Like reality cannot change, but in the objective reality, reality keeps changing from one to another. Truth keeps changing from one to another. My truth will differ to your truth. So it's objective reality. It has no permanent essence in it. This has permanent essence in it. Here the truth remains one without a second. It does not change. God does not change. But in the objective reality, even God changes. Every religion has a different God. Demographically we have a different God. Imagine, demographically, as you go from area to community to society, God starts changing. So the God changes. Here the God does not change. Then it is constant. Energy is constant, indivisible. Whereas in the worldly life, all matter and consciousness appear and disappear. There is separation between me and you, between one physical object to another physical object. There is separation between one consciousness to another consciousness, because it is individualized. Even if it is abstract, it is in separation, it is in relativity. Then not two meaning Advait, but not even one. Not even one. After not two comes zero. And like Albert Einstein said, if Hindus had not discovered zero, there would not have been much of a progress in science, nor in mathematics, because zero on its own is nothing, is absolute. It's a circle. That is why energy moves in a circle. It's cyclical. From planets to earth, to all are revolving, to moon, all are revolving each other, to whirlpool, to cyclone, to whatever you think, energy moves in a circle. In a circle. Cyclically. Birth and death, life, all moving in a circle. And not two. Advait. Whereas in the worldly life 2 or more, multiple. So, there is no observer in the universe. The observer and the observed is one. One meaning the same. Whereas in the worldly life, the observer and the observed are separate. They are divided by consciousness. Consciousness separates the moment the mind becomes aware. The separation starts. It's become external now from internal. From internal awareness, it's gone to external awareness. The moment the mind becomes aware, it enables the mind to become conscious. And once it becomes conscious, it attaches to one duality or the other. Either it attaches to lie or to the truth. So, the observer and the observed becomes separate when it comes to the worldly life or the world. Then, universe, there's only Brahman, the existence of Brahman, waves of energy, Brahm, which expand. And in the worldly life, we have energy expressing and exhibiting itself as matter and consciousness. Matter and consciousness, which is just, as per science, 4% or 5%, whatever, very minimal. Then the energy is attributeless. It is attributeless. It has no attributes of its own, but it has an intrinsic, inert ability within itself, within the universe. It has the ability to express within itself into potential and kinetic energy. Meaning when the energy moves within itself, it vibrates in different frequencies, by which on condensation we have matter and we have through awareness, consciousness. These are all inert and intrinsic. On its own, energy is not aware. On its own, it has no ability for its own self. But within itself, within the universe, there is a potentiality of movement, of becoming aware. So, then, ability from which everything appears and disappears back into the nothingness of the universe. There is no I, no self, only the universal spirit. Why spirit? Because spirit is metaphysical. Spirit is now termed as energy. And spirit revolves around the metaphysical realm of spiritualism. It has been given. In Greek it means spiritus. We in Hindus do not use the word spirit, we use it as Brahman, Brahm. Like in the 4 commandments of the Vedas. Prajnanam Brahma, the insight, the intelligence of the human being is Brahma, is the creator, is the divine, that art thou, which I'll explain later in elaborating further. So there is no I, there is no self, there is no I. There is only the universal spirit in waves of energy. There is no such thing as universal consciousness. Consciousness is individual because mind becomes conscious. It's a process of the mind. There is no universal consciousness. There is universal awareness, you can say, because universal spirit is there, because the ability of the Brahman is there to express itself, to make the mind, the living creatures, aware from which they get the conscious principle. to become aware. A plant is aware, an animal is aware, and a human being is aware to its highest intensity. The NESS is the suffix by which gives out the degree or the intensity. So there is no I in the body, mind and soul, in the body, mind and consciousness. The Absolute is non-changing. It's constant, whereas in the matter and consciousness, it's constantly changing. In the Hindus, the consciousness changes from Jivatma to Antaratma to Paratma. Various types of consciousness, constantly changing from going from the lower to the higher. So, this is choiceless. In the Absolute, there is no choice. Whereas, in duality, the purpose of duality, the purpose for the Absolute to experience life of duality for the time that it is alive and awake is to make a choice between the good and the bad, the divine and the devil. That is the beauty of life. That is the game, that is the Leela of the Absolute. To enjoy this game, without any meaning and purpose, to choose between this and that, between good and bad, and to self-observe as to which direction we are going. So, universe is in subjective reality. The worldly life and the world is in objective reality. The universe is in nothingness, zero, whereas the worldly life is in multiplicity. So universe, in summary, it is the ability, it is the spirit, it is the ultimate, it is the God. And in the worldly life, what matters most is the existence. The existence is what? The quality of being, the quality of being something. The quality of being something, that is existence. Whereas in the universe there is no existence. There is no existence. And ultimately the universe is defined as the Para Brahman, Parameshwar, Paratma. Para Brahman means, para means beyond. Beyond Brahman, beyond of all beyonds, is the inert ability of the Brahman or the energy, is to make the purest, the totality of energy, which is non-dual, that is awareness. It is awareness, and that is Para Brahman. Then comes Parameshwar, beyond God. Beyond God meaning beyond all human gods of higher consciousness. All these human gods were of higher consciousness, and above them is Para Brahma. Para Brahma, the supreme intelligence. And then we have Paratma, beyond consciousness. And beyond consciousness is Para Brahman and Parameshwar. So on the other side we have the observer as the soul, as the individual soul, which contains the spirit, which makes the mind aware, and after that consciousness. There is a being in body, mind and soul. Soul is that beingness, body and mind. Mind is subtle energy in between, and being is the physicality, in separation, in duality. So I found it easier to write it down, to make my whole session concise. I wrote it down so that I should not forget anything, because many a time in many of my videos I have realized there were certain important things which I forgot, and it went off my mind to mention. So this is the summary of the observer and the observed. The universe is said to be in unity and continuity. The observer is the observed, whereas in the mind There's a separation through which all conflicts arise because of choosing, of choice. And why choice? Because choice is selfish. We choose primarily for our self-interest, for the sake of self-preservation. That is what mind is designed for. Choose. And in order to choose, there is separation into duality. In the duality. So then when it is said, thou art that, you are that divine, Prachinanam, Brahma, the creator is the intelligence. The creator is the intelligence. Ayam Atman Brahman, the consciousness, the pure consciousness, the soul is that absolute Brahman. Thou art that. Tattvam Asi. And Aham Brahmasmi, these are the four Mahavakyas. Aham Brahmasmi. I am that aware conscious principle, aware conscious. Aham, I am that aware conscious energy. I am not the mind, I am not the body, because the mind is my instrument to use, not to be used by it. And I am not the body. I am not the body. I am that eternal self, established and settled in the human mind, in the human soul. Why the human mind is? The mind is divided into three sections. 98 to 99% is the subconscious section, and very minimally the conscious section. But which science is silent about is the superconscious section of the mind, which they do not know whether it exists or not, but that is the realm of the soul. That is where the soul resides, where the mind is silenced, where no thoughts prevail. Where no thoughts prevail. So, thou art that. Now the question comes, do we get a glimpse of the observer and the observed being the same? Yes. Since we are the divine, we do get that non-dual presentation. It is when we observe inside, when we observe our thoughts, inwardly, our feelings, our our emotions, when we observe inside, but that observation of the observer being the observed becomes the same only when the soul is watching the mind. The soul is watching the mind and it awakens, activates the mind. But the soul, when it is purely watching and not activating, when it activates the mind, it becomes aware. But when it is only watching, simply watching its thoughts, without censoring, without rejecting, without accepting, without any analysis, without any evaluation, in its purity, it is only watching as to how the thoughts are chattering, multitasking here and there, constantly chatting. So it is that small, that glimpse, that fleeting moment is that small space. The sky, that is the soul, that is the eternal self inside us, that is the spirit residing within the soul, is, say, like the sky, and it is totally clouded with dark clouds. In between, if there is a space, that space is that glimpse, that fleeting moment when we see the sky, when we see through the sky. Not see the sky, when we see through the sky, the space of that sky which has been covered by dark clouds, which has been covered by the thinking self, not the true self. The true self is the soul. And the thinking self presumes itself to be that I. Presumes itself, I am this and I am that, which is the false self to be presuming as I, because it is not the I. It is just presuming through its thoughts. It's just a bundle of thoughts. I and the mind is just a bundle of thoughts. I and the soul is still, to some extent, it is there. Why? Because it is the seat of awareness. It is the seat of knowing. It is the seat of making us understand. Whereas the mind is intellectual. It just has knowledge, which has no meaning. It is connected to the memory and the intellect. Memory and the intellect. And intellect is all of the past. There may be thousands of doctors. Intellectually, they have cleared the exams and they've got the degree. But that doesn't mean that they're good. There are very few, very, very few who are intelligent doctors, who are experienced doctors, who are wise. So, observer and the observed is within a time duration of separation and division. Observer and the observed being the same is in those fleeting moments, in those glimpses, which has no restriction of space and time. It is purely witnessing as the Sakshi, and that is why the soul has been termed as the Sakshi, as the divine within, in which there is no separation, no division, no differentiation of this and that which mind is accustomed to. Thank you for listening. Namaste.